It's not an easy thing to make an entertaining or interesting movie when you've got hardly anything to work with. Hardly any people, very few locations, and not necessarily a huge amount of visuals or audio effects to work with. So when a movie does make a good story, be it compelling or just entertaining, when they don't have much to work with, that really appeals to me and impresses me. In fact, those are my favourite kind of movies. Movies that do a lot with a little. And that's one of the reasons why I really enjoyed watching this movie. This is a movie which, as far as I'm aware, didn't have huge commercial success. It's not really a movie that people talk about that much, if at all, and it's a movie which I believe more people should see, because it's a lot better than it easily could have been. So often I see movies and wish that they had really delivered on the potential that they have. This is one of those rare occasions where it does deliver on the potential that it has, despite the fact that it has hardly anything to work with. This film revolves basically around a handful of people in one location, a freezer, and that's it. But what they managed to do with that, I found really entertaining and very impressive. Now, the acting isn't exactly Oscar-worthy, of course, but it's definitely above par compared to what it easily could have been. You could have got nobodies to do this role, but they got people who could actually act. As I said, they ain't Oscar winners, but they were more than good enough. Now, this movie stars a primary character played by Dylan McDermott, and the rest of the characters have names that I'm just not going to butcher because I don't know how to pronounce them properly. Now, that being said, everyone in this film I think gives a good performance, even those who aren't necessarily in it for as long or play as important a role. Now, without spoiling anything, of course, the plot, or the story of the movie, revolves around one guy, played by Dylan McDermott, who wakes up in a freezer, and he very quickly realises that this isn't some prank. It's a very serious situation, with some very serious and deadly people. And basically that's all you need to know. If that sounds like it appeals to you, you will enjoy this, because this film does a lot with that concept, and I really enjoyed what they did with it. Now, I can't go any further than that without spoiling anything down the line. Now, as I said, this isn't like an Oscar-level movie or anything like that, but it was very entertaining, I really enjoyed watching it, and it's actually one of the best films I've seen from 2014. Especially in the underappreciated category. What though about our ratings? Well, first of all, of course, we have the story and the plot, and for the story and plot of Freezer, I'm actually going to give this film an 8, which is pretty high. Relatively few movies go above a 7 for me, so that indicates just how much I think of this film. I really do think they did a really good job with the basic premise and the location in particular. So it's an 8 from me. As far as the people, the characters, their motivations, etc., they were very well chosen, and you don't really get much backstory into people that much, but the information that you do get helps you to become endeared, obviously to certain people more than others, but all of the characters are interesting. There aren't any stupid people in this film, which is one of my biggest pet peeves in cinema, stupid people doing stupid things, and I love the fact that there aren't stupid people in this. They actually do realistic things. They're not necessarily always the best decisions, but at the same time they're not stupid people. So overall, for the characters, the relatively few of them, and the motivations, etc., I'm going to give the film a 7. As far as the visuals and effects, well, that aspect suffers a little. I'm going to give it a 5, which isn't a bad rating. For me, that's a baseline. Anything below a 5 isn't very good. A 5 itself is a default setting, basically, what it needs to be, and anything above a 5 is impressive. So I'm going to give this film a 5, a baseline, default 5, because it doesn't have a lot to work with. As I said, it's one location, there are very, very few special effects used, the makeup is relatively basic, and there were some visual effects which I actually would have liked to have seen done better, primarily one of the things that bugged me in the film was that you couldn't see anyone's breath, despite the fact that they're supposed to be in a freezer. And that did annoy me. But it didn't ruin the film, far from it, although you probably will notice that now that I've said it. So overall, for the visuals and effects, it's a baseline of 5. As far as the audio and soundtrack in general, again, I'm going to give it a 5 because it wasn't memorable. The music that was used, as I often say, just does what music is supposed to do. It works in the moments that it's there. It just wasn't overly memorable, didn't really shout out and grab me. So it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either. I'm giving it a 5. And finally, the most subjective, of course, to me personally, is the rewatchability and entertainment factor. And in that regard, I'm going to give Freezer a 7. It's not necessarily a movie that I would watch a lot, but it's definitely a movie that I would want to watch multiple times again, and I did enjoy it very much. As far as movies that have hardly anything to work with go, this is definitely one of the best examples. In fact, I would put this up there with other movies like Frozen. Not Disney's Frozen, but the Frozen which I talked about on the channel before, where it's 3 kids stuck on a ski lift. That was a great use of minimalism. This film is another great example of that methodology, and I really enjoy that kind of filmmaking. It really impresses me, and I really enjoy it. So overall, I'm giving it a 7. It's not the most rewatchable movie ever, and you'll understand why when you see it once. But apart from that, I really enjoyed it. So overall, that gives us a tabulated score for Freezer of a decent 3.2 out of 5. And although that may not sound that impressive, the reason for that is because, of course, the visuals and effects and also the audio weren't really amazing. If they were a little bit better, which in the case of this film wasn't really necessary, then the overall rating would be higher. So don't necessarily view that as a bad thing in the case of this movie. That's just the way it happened to turn out due to the obvious lack of special effects due to the story and the audio, which could have been better, but didn't rely on the music. So overall, 3.2 as far as I'm concerned is a very reasonable score for this film, and I would definitely recommend checking it out. This is a film which people, as I said earlier, just aren't talking about, and it's so much better than many bigger films that I've seen, in my opinion at least. But that's it overall for this particular review. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.